Hi everybody, good to see you back. We're going to do the C300 versus XT3 dynamic range shootout. And my goal here isn't to shoot a 21 stop chart because I don't own one of those. My point is to just take the cameras out and shoot some real practical shooting situations like, my setup right here. So we're going to do everything pretty much identical. I'm going to take the C300 Mark II and put it onto the tripod, same lens, same setup, and see where we come out. Oh, hold on a second. Before we go and throw the C300 Mark II on, let's try two other things with the XT3. This time, I'm trying this in HLG mode, which I think might really be the sweet spot for this camera. And I can kind of see just peeking at the monitor. I'm seeing some detail outside. Let me move my head over. This is FLOG, and if I scoot myself over a little bit like that, you can still see that we're holding some detail outside in the trees. I'm using the same exposure. I'm at ISO 200. The lens is at f4, so this is just insanely sharp. My exposure has been consistent for all of these. I haven't moved the ISO. The lens is at f4, and because I didn't have the right ND filter, so I think I've got the shutter at about a 60th or a 90th of a second. Well, it's a little bit of a cheat, but I need to get a good exposure. And I've matched the settings between cameras, at least as far as ISO and exposure. So the C300's at ISO 200 right now, f4 on the lens, same focal length. And I mean, the first thing that you see probably immediately is that you see a lot more stuff outside. You see, I'm not sure if I have the ideal matching exposure right now. So at least on the monitor, inside my face, it looks kind of dark. So I'm going to open this up, or actually I'll take the ISO up a stop or two. Let's see what we get if I open this up. Okay, we took the C300 up to ISO 400. Everything else has stayed identical. And surprisingly, I'm still holding stuff outside. This camera is really holding on to the highlights amazingly well. My face exposure, the inside looks pretty good. And certainly I know once I grade this that I will be able to just pump it up a little bit and it'll be great. ISO 800, and the exposure on the interior is looking a lot better. It looks more normal. It looks pretty close to what I started out with the XT3. And yet again, we're still seeing stuff outside. This camera is really holding on to the highlights pretty amazingly. Now, I do want to make one note about the XT3. It has highlight and shadow adjustments to either raise or lower those appropriately. And I have it set to bring the highlights down, which should increase its dynamic range a little bit, and it does. You can definitely see that it probably improves the highlight holding ability of the camera, at least to stop. The interesting question is, can you mix these two? Will they be intercut between each other, or can I set up the XT3 as a side shot? So, all right, so two camera setup. Which camera do you... Oh, that camera. Anyway, so now I got both cameras up, and this was the reason that I had bought the XT3, was to use it as a B cam, as a second camera. And you can see outside the windows kind of are blowing out behind me, but if I come back to the other camera, does it make a difference? I mean, does it just so jar your version or your viewing of what's going on here? It could have gone a little closer, whatever. We're not going to get into the specifics of framing. I have both these cameras set at about 24 mil or 20 mil, whatever, and they're both at f4. The XT3 is at the same settings that I had set. They're in the basic same range of exposure, which is great. If I can get a matched exposure between the two cameras with the same lighting, that's a big deal. So the other question is, can I do this? I mean, do they look close enough that no one's really going to notice? Or are you going to have to do a crazy amount of grading to see if they match? Now, this is a little crazy. I've never done a two-camera setup in here by myself, so there's a lot of stuff going on that you can't see. So let's go do the grading and the editing and compare these cameras, and let's see what we get. Hybrid log game, HLG, and I'm exposing basically for all the snow and stuff that's going on behind me. I've got very warm highlights, I've got cool shadows, and there's my face, and I can see on my little monitor here, I've got the Ninja mounted up on top of the camera, that my face is underexposed. I've got a little bit of bounce coming from behind the camera and from some snow that's around me. But, basically, I'd technically really be underexposed for average shooting situations. FLOG, and again, the sun continues to go in and out, so I've been bouncing around on the ISO a bit, but we should get a pretty good idea of how this looks. And again, on the histogram on the camera, I'm being careful to make sure that my exposures aren't clipped one way or the other, and that I'm basically exposing to get a nice histogram sitting right in the middle, occupying about 80% of what appears to be the histogram area. Oh, and here comes the sun. Well, you know what? This is a perfectly good test because obviously this does happen in real life. Sun comes out in the middle of your shot. Can the camera take it when this happens? Are you going to just fry out your highlights, or are they still going to retain detail and look pretty good? Here's your test. Last but not least, let's just shoot in the Eterna profile. And again, my face is underexposed. I know that when I'm shooting, but I'm trying to protect those highlights out there. And hopefully the sun's going to pop out, which I think it sort of is. Or maybe not. We may be done with the sun today, or at least any direct sunlight, which, hey, the sun came out. This is classic chrome. I figured I might as well try this one, sneak it in, see how it looks. All right, there we go. The light's changing pretty quick right now, but this is the C300, and I've gone straight to C-Log 3 and cinegamut. And I'm using the same lens, same ND filter. White balance on this camera says about 6000 K, but I don't have a lot of time to mess around with this right now because, as you can see, the sun is almost over my shoulder. So the light right now is a little bit flatter, but I'm still trying to make the same exposure. You know, I've got no problem with that, but my face, I mean, I can see that on both the monitors that I'm trying to look at here, and yeah, I look really underexposed. Well, at least on one of them I do. Rec 709 5X. It's got a couple of different 709 settings. Some seem to favor the shadows, some seem to favor the highlights. So I don't have a lot of time to do this. I just kind of dialed this in. I see again my face is underexposed, and I'm going to have to take a look and see that I didn't clip out the highlights. So what's my takeaway? Well, the XT3 really kind of surprised me. It's got more dynamic range than I expected. Is it the same as the C300 Mk2? No, but, well, obviously they intercut pretty well together. Now, the grading between the two shots that I had in here did take a bit more time and effort than I expected. Each camera had its own kind of color cast, and what helped me a lot was the fact that I had a neutral gray shirt on. That kind of gave me something to dial in on now. Hindsight's 20/20, of course, and I've got one of those little chip charty things that everybody has, which works in Resolve, that I could have auto balanced to, but I forgot to do that. And yeah, it's just the nature of doing things by yourself. But, you know, again, it's something we've all done. We've all just been thrown out into a shoot that we had to do quick, and we didn't always have the setup time that we might have liked. So I think that's one of the things that really separates the good gear from the great gear. Does it function under pressure? Does it work when you don't have a lot of setup time? Can you trust it? Does it give you a little margin? And the XT3 seems to be heading in that direction for me. Certainly the C300 does that. I don't worry about or think about using that camera for a huge variety of shoots. The shots that I did on the XT3 and the C300 outside surprised me. It was cold. It wasn't the most pleasant workplace, but I toughed my way through the shots. One of the things that kind of bothered me on this shoot was that I was using my old Ninja for a monitor right on top of the Fuji, and you know, it works. I can see a picture. It's a backup record if I ever worried about that. It's a nice little unit, except it lied to me, and it showed me a picture that once I got it over here into Resolve, it really wasn't accurate. There was some overexposure. Where the difference lies, I don't know, and I'm not necessarily willing to spend a lot of time investigating it when, for all practical purposes, this can go to eBay and find a new home and be loved and appreciated. Hey, it turned itself on. Anyway, the grading on this proved to be a little bit more challenging. The outside stuff probably fell into line a bit better. In Resolve, it doesn't specifically have a Fuji LUT for HLG, but there are a series of generic ones, and I took the HLG to 2.4 gamma as the basis of the output LUT, in other words, second node, for the looks that I graded. And on the first node, I just dialed it until I got what I think was the best look. Now, a couple of shots, I did play around a little bit more. I did some masking on it, like on the shoulder over the shoulder through the window to get a little bit more that was there, but I couldn't quite get in the initial grade, and that's fine. I wanted to show you what was there and what was possible with a modest amount of effort, nothing that was going to get too crazy. FLOG really kind of held its own, and I've been kind of back and forth about HLG or FLOG. Yet here I am shooting in the standard Provia setting, and you know, if my monitor, which is actually lighting my face right now, isn't lying to me too much, I might actually just let this go out the door as is, because it's very, very close to what I probably would have graded to anyway, except I didn't have to put the work in. What I think was more impressive is that this camera is definitely capable of hanging out with some of the bigger and more expensive cinema cameras that are out there. It's definitely a really solid B camera for someone starting out. It could definitely be an A camera. If you're going to use it on a gimbal, a stabilizer, this could really prove to be a very interesting option because it's much smaller and more lightweight and compact, all things that you want when you're working with some kind of stabilizer rig. The XT3 is really starting to prove to me that it's an incredibly capable camera. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. Look forward to it, and we're going to get to that Lexar thing next.